Although God is everywhere, certain places remind us of His presence and encourages us to live holy lives before Him. The Kebar was a river that ran through the land of the Chaldeans. Ezekiel sat here among the captives and received many of his visions and prophetic words at this location. Here we can see Ezekiel's priestly concerns and knowledge come into play. The temple was described in architectural terms in the previous chapters, and as such, it is empty and lifeless. Now, the glory of God came to the temple. As a result, the temple was full of life. And that brings us to our key verse for today, which reads, "Then the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner courtyard, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple." Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 5. The sun rises in the east, so God's glory followed the path of the rising sun as it cast its light on the temple. Entering the east gate led directly to the main entrance to the temple, which was a direct path to the Holy of Holies. Directly to the east of the Temple Mount is the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane, both of which have momentous biblical significance, including both Jesus' agony and his parting ascension. This gate is also the one into which Jesus rode on a donkey on Palm Sunday, another example of God's incarnate glory entering the temple from the east. The word for east in Hebrew also means first or at the beginning, indicating that God's glory has existed since the beginning and is primal, that is, first and fundamental. Ezekiel had two prior experiences with God's glory. One, he saw in a vision the destruction of Jerusalem when the glory left, moving toward the east. And two, he saw a vision of the glory when he was called to the ministry of prophecy by the river Kebar, where the glory had come from the north. Nothing could be more natural than to fall prostrate before such brilliant radiance. Since Ezekiel witnessed the glory departing, it was altogether fitting that he is given a preview of its return. Even in a vision, Ezekiel does not behold God directly, but rather he hears from him from within the Holy of Holies. His glory makes it beyond human ability to perceive him directly. Although God dwells in heaven and earth cannot contain God, still, God chooses to dwell on the earth. The word dwell in Hebrew is shakan, which means reside, inhabit, or rest, and is at the root of the word Shekinah, which does not appear in Scripture, referring to the glory of God that appeared in a cloud to guide the Israelites. This cloud also appeared to Moses on Mount Sinai and filled the tabernacle in the wilderness when it was finished. It also filled Solomon's temple on the day of its dedication. Interestingly, the Hebrew for tabernacle, mishkan, also comes from this same root. Some theologians connect this dwelling or settling of the divine presence with the New Testament use of the Greek parousia, which means presence or coming. Israel was not complete without God's presence, and now it will not only return, but this time it will be home forever. God reminds Ezekiel why his presence had departed from the people, because of their cumulative and collective sins. The ultimate disaster for Israel was the Lord's departure. Even captivity by her enemies did not compare to God's absence. Conversely, the ultimate blessing for Israel would be God's permanent return. The element on which both departure and return hinged was Israel's faithlessness or her faithfulness. As a result, it is not enough that the people be aware of God's return. They must know everything involved with the temple, including its design and the laws and teachings associated with it, which refer to the instructions originally laid out through Moses. Just as Jesus came not to destroy the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them, so Ezekiel promises that God will restore the blessings associated with him originally through Moses. So here's our lesson. Many today are in self-imposed exile, imprisoned by their own bondages and held in bondage by their addictions and profane habits. Not so different from the people of Ezekiel's time, they are in desperate need of the hope of God's glory entering their temple and evicting their darkness and sin. By experiencing God, we experience the sacred place of God's glorious presence within